YouTube, we are here for our quick look / review of Boys Run the Riot, man, a manga by Keito Gaku. And this was a really cool and big surprise for me, man. I was immediately taken in by the cover. The cover art was it was really striking, you know, like the colors, but also it had like the split down the middle with like the male half and the female half, and that kind of gets into the source, or it gets into the heart of what this manga is about, man, which is gender identity. And this individual in the manga struggle with gender identity, learning how to be themselves, learning how to properly express themselves in a world and in a social situation that isn't exactly accepting of people with differences, and their attempt to navigate the complexities of all that. Now, the main character of our story is Ryo, and Ryo is an individual that was born female but identifies as male, but they are growing up in Japan, right? And Japan, if you're familiar, is a society that pretty well works by the motto, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, right? So like any sort of uniqueness or any sort of like standing out or being different from the crowd is seen as something to be looked down upon. It's seen as like cringy. It's seen as like, what are you doing? You're going to be an outcast. Nobody's going to want to be around you. And so Ryo has been living his whole life basically with trying to accept the fact that he was born a woman and that this is how things are going to be for him, and that he pretty much just has to suck it up because that's the only way to go through life. But as time progresses and he starts to get older and he has to go through so many situations where he's pushing down his real self, his real desires, like his own personal self-expression, he becomes stifled and more depressed, and it starts to get to a boiling point, man, where like he's just really not enjoying his life anymore. But things begin to change for Ryo when he meets the new transfer student, Jin. So Jin is a student who comes in and he does not at all abide by that motto of the nail who sticks out gets hammered down. He is someone who very much is okay with his uniqueness. He comes in with a haircut that's seen as like a delinquent status, right? He's got like the shave size little ponytail happening, and he's okay with standing out from the crowd and being exactly who he is. And Ryo sees him, and at first there's a lot of disdain or anger towards Jin basically for being himself, because Ryo thinks that like, how in the world could you possibly do this, right? How are you so willing to deal with all this crap from other people and to just stand out in this way? How could you possibly be okay with how the world is treating you like this? And one day, Ryo and Jin have a fateful meeting, right, at a shop where they're both into fashion, man. They're both really into clothes, and they both end up at the same shop at the same time, looking at the same shirt. And Jin, being the man that he is, sees this as fate, right? He's been looking for a business partner to start up his fashion business with, and he thinks that Ryo, him having the same taste as Jin does when it comes to clothing and then being in the same spot, like what better person to start up this partnership? Now, Ryo at first is very hesitant to do this, right? Because it just seems like a foolish endeavor. Like, we don't have any money. We're just high school kids. How could we possibly get off the ground? It just basically seems like a pipe dream, right? But the more he starts to think about it, the more he realizes his own personal love of fashion, and the idea starts to stick in his head, right? Like, he knows that it's something deep down that would be cool to pursue, and it's an area of passion for him too, but he's so stifled in societal expectations, right? And I think that this is the real crux of the story, is Ryo's journey to learn to be okay with himself and learn to accept himself for who he is, and also present that to the world while navigating the very strict and traditional sort of norms and values present in Japanese culture. And what I really like about this manga, man, is I feel like it can be a very educational and enlightening experience for somebody who may not necessarily be the most familiar with the journey of like trans people at home or abroad. You know, I think that the author Keito Gaku, who I also learned was trans themselves, right? I believe he was trans female to male, and Keito very much through the character of Ryo showcases a lot of the struggles and the internal strife and turmoil that kind of comes with not accepting parts of yourself, you know. And I don't think that this book is something that only somebody who has been a part of the trans struggle will be able to relate to. I think that this book very much is relatable to anybody who feels like they have parts of themselves that they are being forced to hide from society, you know, whether that be your own hobbies, your own personal self-interest, having artistic endeavors that other people tell you are foolish or stupid. I think that this book is extremely relatable to anybody who feels like that they've had to stifle or hide a part of themselves in order to fit in. And I think that the lesson here is something extremely valuable, right? And that sort of alternative perspective and that sort of moving into freedom and learning to be yourself is embodied through the character of Jin, who tells Ryo that it is difficult, right? I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that it's going to be a simple thing to be yourself and to come out or to express people what you want to do with yourself. But at the same time, it's much more freeing and less of a burden to do that than it is to keep hiding who and what you are. And this struggle, man, is it can be a long one. You know, it's not a simple journey. It's not just because somebody tells you these words that you automatically go and embody and enact them. And that's what I appreciate about this book, right? It shows it shows Ryo kind of struggling with this, right? On the one hand, understanding that in order for him to be truly happy, he's got to be honest about who he is and what it is that he wants to do with himself. But on the other, struggling to just fit in and not wanting to be bullied and being harassed by other students like he was, because again, with Ryo being the person that he is, he had always gravitated towards men or more masculine activities because that's who he is on the inside, right? But the people around him would always say that, oh, Ryo's just boy crazy. Like, they're just basically trying to get with all these guys and steal these girls' boyfriends. And they have no real clue about who Ryo is or what they're actually going through. They make all these assumptions and assume the worst of him. And they don't even attempt to get to understand the real person. And Ryo's experiences with dealing with this sort of thing is what has turned him into the person that he is, right? It's taught him the lesson that in order to get by and survive in this environment that I'm in, I have to keep my head low and cause as little waves as possible. And at one point in the book, he says that everything will be okay if I'm the only one that knows the truth about me. And this is something that he believes and doesn't believe, you know, at the same time. There's a dialectic happening there, right? Where, like, on the one hand, he wants to be accepted by others and, like, not have to go about life hiding who and what he is. But at the same time, every experience that he's had has taught him that this is the only way to get by and the only way to make it. So if I want to survive with as little trouble as possible, this is what needs to happen. So I highly recommend this story, man. Towards the end of this first volume, they meet Itsuka, right? Because they need a photographer for their book. And Itsuka's journey is also one of self-discovery, right? Of learning to stand up on your own 2 feet and not hide behind the coattails of other people. Itsuka is someone who's basically lived in the shadow of his more popular friend and friend group for his entire life. He's been basically getting by on their popularity. It's helped him cruise through school without having too much trouble, but he's always felt like he's lived in that shadow, right? He's always felt stifled creatively, felt like he couldn't pursue the things that actually matter to him. And it's not until he has a fateful run-in with Jin and Ryo, right? He sees graffiti that they painted on the wall to promote their fashion business. He takes a picture of it because something about it speaks to him, right? I think the raw sincerity and the honesty of it is something that he could relate to, even though it wasn't something that he wanted to admit. He ends up meeting up with these guys and he takes, like, their pictures, right, for their portfolio. And after his friends see him hanging out with, like, these outcasts, right, like these delinquents, they give him a bunch of crap. And basically Itsuka comes to a crossroads of having to decide, am I going to pursue what honestly means something to me, pursue my creative endeavors and be the person that I want to be, or am I going to continue to live in the shadow of these people and just keep my head down and do what I need to get by because I want to cause as little trouble as possible? So this struggle is also present for him, but in a different way from Ryo. So if any of that stuff that I just talked about speaks to you, please check out Boys Run the Riot by Keito Gaku. It's an entertaining story. It doesn't feel preachy, but at the same time, I feel like it's something that's extremely educational too. And I feel like I got a lot out of it, man. I learned that a lot of the trans experience, what I'm learning about the trans experience from this book, is something that I can relate to on a personal level in many different ways. You know, as somebody who has maybe, like, unconventional interests compared to what society may consider normal. As someone who's black and comes from like a more marginalized culture than a lot of the people around me, like living in small towns and stuff like that, there was a lot of myself I could see in Rio and the things that he was struggling with, even if it wasn't necessarily those specific same issues that I've dealt with, right? So please, man, if it's speaking to you, if you like anything that I've been saying so far, do yourself a favor, check out Boys Run the Riot by Keito Gaku. You are not going to be upset that you did. Oh, and before I forget, one of my favorite parts of this manga, right, is when Ryo confronts Itsuka about basically giving in to his friends and not doing what he wants to because he's afraid of the judgment, and he tells Itsuka that he's a waste of a pair of balls. And that was the funniest thing I have read in a long time, and especially coming from Ryo, who is just like, I would kill to be a man, and here you are being this blubbering wreck who can't even stand up on their own 2 feet. Like, you're a poor excuse for what a man is. And it just cracked me up, like, where it's just the raw honesty, sincerity, and the genuineness of it. It was too good, man. So that was my favorite moment in this volume, and I definitely plan on checking out more. So I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for listening to me. Take it easy.